Hello everybody! Welcome to our next installment on our lesson series of Pray Like. Tonight's topic is going to be Pray Like Jehoshaphat. So I am very excited to be going through this lesson series with you. I hope that the lessons have been beneficial so far. If you have any feedback or any thoughts, please feel free to let us know. We do these lesson series for us in our own personal study and growth, obviously. But also for y'all, Come Fill Your Cup is about women coming together to fill each other's cups and to spur one another on and really get into the meat of God's Word. So please feel free to give us any thoughts, any feedback, so that we can do better for next time for us and for you. So also please be praying about everybody who's involved in this study, the speakers especially. I know I could always use plenty of thoughts and prayers, so please feel free to be throwing those out there. But also, pray for each other, That's what this whole series is about, is prayer is something that is special and important, and so we need to really know what we're talking about when we're talking about prayer. But it's not going to do us a whole bunch of good if we don't put that into action. So be praying for everybody who's involved in these studies. I know that they have been really beneficial for me so far, and I hope that they have also been really beneficial for you. And I've done a lot of talking because I'm trying to make sure that the video's up and going and that people can hear me. So if you can hear me, please let me know. I would really appreciate it. They say that the younger people are supposed to be able to do technology better. I can 100% guarantee you that I cannot do technology better than Mr. Lance and Miss Christy Huntsman. So in some ways, this has been a really nice format because it's easier for people to access, it's easier for us to produce. But in other ways, I have so many concerns that I'm going to mess it up and not be able to actually get the video going. So if y'all can let me know that it's going well. Yay! Thank you, Miss Pat. I appreciate it. Sounds like we're up and going. So I will probably give it just a little bit longer in case there are people who are wanting to watch it live. It's so handy that we can do videos that are live in one sense and then people are able to watch them later, because I know that I like to listen to them whenever I'm in the car. I can't do podcasts. I don't know. It's weird. I can probably try them again. When I was younger, I didn't really do podcasts, but I will listen to these and it's like, oh, I'm going to have to do that again because they said something and it made me think of this and I'm going to have to be able to go look at it, but I'll have to watch the video again. So I like having the format in which we're able to have them both live and recorded, stored for later on. So that's been a very nice bonus. Okay, we've got a couple people watching, so just for the sake of time, I'm probably going to go ahead and get started. And I want to start off by asking y'all some questions, and they are not always the most fun questions to consider. Have you ever been in a situation where it just blew you out of the water and you had no idea what to expect? You didn't know what was coming, you didn't know how to handle it, you were just completely thrown off. Some circumstances came up that just hit you right in the core and sent you staggering back. Maybe you found out about a loved one's health situation and that they were going downhill mentally or physically and you didn't know how to respond. Or maybe someone that you cared about had walked away from their relationship with the Lord and returned to a life of sin. Or maybe something happened and you no longer had a home or a job or a way to provide for your family. What did you do in those circumstances? When that happened, how did you respond? What could you do? Was there anything? Did you immediately burst into action and try to fix the problem? Did you sit and cry? There's so many different responses because it's an overwhelming circumstance. But rest assured, you are not alone in facing those overwhelming circumstances. Tonight, we're going to talk about somebody who can serve as a very good example for us whenever times like this come up. So as usual, we're going to start with some background information, some context, if you will. It's been interesting doing the study on Jehoshaphat after doing Nehemiah because their historical contexts are pretty similar in some ways. First of all, this is happening at a time in the Bible during the divided kingdom. So the nation of Israel, after their first three kings, Saul, David, and Solomon, was divided into two sections. You have the northern kingdom, referred to as Israel, which is comprised of 10 tribes, and we have the southern kingdom, which is referred to as Judah, made up of Judah and Benjamin. They were similar in some ways, one of those ways being that they had a hard time keeping in their covenant with God. They would chase after foreign lands and false gods and sinful lifestyles and fail to remember who had provided for them and who took care of them time and time again. But they were also different in some ways, the principal way being the fact that the kingdom of Israel had 0 good kings. All of their rulers were evil, wicked men who wanted to live sinful lifestyles, and instead of leading God's people back to him and closer to him, they usually led the people further away from God, introducing more false gods, intermarrying with different cultures that would lead them further away from God. It was just many, many bad circumstances and bad choices that were made. But Judah had some good kings, or at least that's how we classify them. And one such king was Jehoshaphat. Jehoshaphat was a man who did his best to walk according to the ways that God had set forth, just like his father Asa had done. Asa was another good king. And it kind of makes sense. At this point in time, we're not too far removed from the time of David. David was Jehoshaphat's great-great-great-grandfather, if I have done my math and history correctly, which hopefully I have. So he had that example of someone, the man after God's own heart, that he could follow in the footsteps of, and his father Asa. And that's a good thing, right? Well, yes and no. Please turn with me to the book of 2 Chronicles. This is where we're going to find a lot of information about King Jehoshaphat. We're going to start in chapter 17, because this is where we get our introduction to him. Chapter 16 ends with King Asa dying, and so chapter 17 is going to begin when Jehoshaphat starts reigning in Jerusalem. We're going to read verses 3 through 6. The Lord was with Jehoshaphat, because he walked in the earlier ways of his father David. He did not seek the Baals, but sought the God of his father, and walked in his commandments, and not according to the practices of Israel. Therefore the Lord established the kingdom in his hand, and all Judah brought tribute to Jehoshaphat, and he had great riches and honor. His heart was courageous in the ways of the Lord, and furthermore, he took the high places in Asherim out of Judah. So we're off to a great start, right? Jehoshaphat is saying, hey, we are not going to have these high places worshiping foreign gods. We're going to seek God, and we're going to have our attention and our focus and our praise and worship be going to where it should be going. It's a great thing. But, as the saying goes, all good things must come to an end. Jehoshaphat is going to make a mistake. And it's not a random mistake. It's one that he should have seen coming, because it's the exact same mistake that his father, King Asa, made. Well, what am I talking about? Let's flip back a couple pages to 2 Chronicles chapter 14 and read verses 2 through 5. And Asa did what was good and right in the eyes of the Lord his God. He took away the foreign altars and the high places, and broke down the pillars, and cut down the Asherim, and commanded Judah to seek the Lord, the God of their fathers, and to keep the law and commandment. He also took out of all the cities of Judah the high places and the incense altars, and the kingdom had rest under him. So, we see here, Asa is also off to a great start, and what makes it more impressive coming from him is he did not have a close good example. His father, King Abijam, and his grandfather, Rehoboam, not good kings, not good examples, and yet King Asa chose to follow in the footsteps of King David and to walk in a way that was pleasing to God. And so God was with him. God helped him have a good kingdom. It was strong. It was thriving. There was peace during much of Asa's reign. But one thing got the better of Asa, and that was fear. In 2 Chronicles 16, we can read that the king of Israel had decided to go against King Asa and the kingdom of Judah. And so in response to this, Asa was afraid. It makes sense. That would be very intimidating. I mean, these are people that you knew. You probably had friends and family members that you would have to be fighting against. Not to mention, they were a much larger group. They would have more resources, more warriors, more land, more food, more water. So much was on the side of the kingdom of Israel if they were to go to war. Not to mention the fact of Jewish heritage. You see, we can see all throughout the Bible that the Jews take pride in the fact that they are children of Abraham, and that is part of why they have this connection with God and part of what makes them special. Well, if you're going against people who are the tribe of, or of the nation of Israel, they're also going to be Abrahamic people. They're going to have that connection with God as well. You know, Asa was able to lead Judah back to following God and back into a right relationship with God through reform, so God was with them. What's to say that that's not going to happen to Israel too? Then whose side is God going to be on? Is he going to side with Israel or with Judah? And so Asa probably has all of these thoughts in his head about what am I going to do? And his response is not to turn to God. Instead, he goes to the king of Syria and he says, hey, I will make an alliance, I will make a covenant with you. You have to be on my side and you have to help me in this situation. And that's going to be his downfall. Basically, from here on into the rest of his life, he is never going to turn and rely on God. Even at the end of his life, when he is sick and dying, he seeks the help of physicians, of other men, instead of relying on God. You know, to us, this seems like such an obvious error. Like, what are you doing? You had it so good. God is with you. He's helping you do great things. You have peace throughout the land. Why did you stop relying on him? It doesn't make sense. At least not until we stop and think about it from an overviewing perspective. How many times do we do the exact same thing? How many times whenever something bad happens in our lives do we immediately run to other people instead of turning to God? How many times do we talk to people and tell them that praying is the least we can do for them? How many times do we turn to God and use prayer as a last resort to solve some situation or crisis that's happening in our lives? Putting things in perspective, it's much easier to see why this was Asa's downfall and why he struggled with it and why Jehoshaphat was so easily able to make the same mistake. So we've seen how Asa relied on men instead of relying on God. How did Jehoshaphat rely on men instead of God? Well, in 2 Chronicles 18:1, we are going to see that Jehoshaphat made an alliance with Ahab, the king of Israel. Yeah, that evil, awful man who was married to the even worse Queen Jezebel, the power couple who had so many false gods, who had so many tantrums about what they were going to get and what they wanted and not getting it, and then they also tried to kill Elijah. Yeah, that would be them. He said, oh, these are the people I need to rely on and have an alliance with. It makes sense, right? Well, 2 Chronicles 21:6 is going to give us a little bit more information about what this alliance was. It was a marriage alliance. Jehoshaphat had his son marry King Ahab's daughter. Who was the daughter? This is something I felt like I should have known and should have realized because once you hear it, it makes so much sense. So I probably forgot it at some point, but it blew my mind. If we read 2 Chronicles 22:2-3, we see that this was none other than Athaliah. Yeah, the woman who murdered her family so that she could rule Judah, yeah, that's the daughter of Ahab. That is who Jehoshaphat has welcomed into his house and into his family with the marriage alliance to his son. It blows my mind! It doesn't make sense! Jehoshaphat looked at the nation of Israel. That was the people that were trying to come against his father and his father's kingdom whenever Asa was alive, and said, oh yes, these are the people I need to align myself with. I can see how closely they follow God, and obviously that's who I need to... It doesn't make sense. I mean, come on, man. What are you doing? Why didn't you learn the lesson? Okay, calm down, Rio. To be fair, he did somewhat learn the lesson, okay? In 2 Chronicles chapter 18, we see that Ahab is having some trouble, and he says, okay, these people are bothering me. I'm going to war. Hey, Jehoshaphat, please come to war with me. Except, remembering that they are in an alliance, this was not really a request. It would be expected that Jehoshaphat would go and help support Ahab in this war. And so he does. But he's smart about it because he puts in some stipulations to their preparation. He says, I want to seek a prophet of the Lord. I want to hear what he has to say. I want God's input. I think at this point, he's realized, hey, this is not a very good situation for me to be in. So what can I do? And his thought is to seek the Lord, which was correct. That was absolutely what he should have done. He didn't know what God wanted. He didn't know what his will was or his input, and so he asked. Sometimes I think that we forget we can do that. In American society, there's very much the mindset of pull yourself up by your bootstraps, you got yourself into that mess, get yourself out of it. And in one form, I think that that is a good concept to have, because we can use it to help people to avoid getting into bad situations repeatedly, and to make sure that they can't pawn off the responsibility and consequences of their own bad actions. But I also think sometimes it's just slapped on something because we don't want to deal with it. We don't want to get down in the mud and the muck and the mire with people and help them with what is going on. They got themselves into it. They can get themselves out of it. Except sometimes they can't. Sometimes there are situations that are just too much for one person to handle. And right now you might be thinking, well, Riel, Galatians 6:5 says, for each will have to bear his own load. And yes, you are correct. I will not disagree with Scripture. That very much is what that verse states. But we had to consider more than just one verse, because verse 2 reads, bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. It's both. Yes, there are some things in our lives, some actions that we take, some responsibilities that we are going to have that we specifically are going to be held responsible and accountable to God for. Absolutely 100%. But we are also going to be held accountable for the times that we did not, or that we did, help one another bear the burdens that happen in life, because sometimes it's just too much for one person to handle. And as Christians, that's love. Like, we should be willing to offer help and guidance and advice and get down in the mud and muck and mire with people sometimes, because that's what God did for us. God saw us when we were unclean and covered in the mire of our sins, and he had love and compassion, and he reached out to us to help us get out of that hole that we could not get out of ourselves. Jehoshaphat knows that he's gotten himself into this situation and he can't get himself out of it. But he knows that God's going to be there to help him anyway. Even though the whole situation is 100% Jehoshaphat's fault, he did it all himself, God is going to be there to help him get out of it. So he asks to consult God, and God answers. Ahab received a not so good prophecy from the prophet that came, and it basically said, hey, you're going to die. And we go on and we see that happen. Ahab does not survive this war that he goes into. But in 2 Chronicles 18:31, we see Jehoshaphat is also fighting in the war, and he's being pursued by enemies. But God leads those enemies away, so Jehoshaphat can return home safely. So now we come to chapter 19, and we might be expecting a triumphant return home, or maybe even just relieved return home, that everything probably went the best that one could expect given the circumstances. And that's not what we get. Instead, we see that Jehoshaphat has a lesson coming. And that lesson is, yes, God will definitely be there to help you get out of situations and be there for you. But he is not going to take away the consequences of the actions that you have done. Because Jehoshaphat returns home and he receives a message from Jehu the seer. And Jehu tells Jehoshaphat, because you have gone and you have made this alliance with Ahab, and you have relied on the strength and the covenants of men instead of the strength and covenants of God, the wrath of God has gone out against you. Oh, I cannot even imagine. I cannot even imagine how terrifying and how horrible it would be to have the literal wrath of God coming against you. So this leads to a huge reform in the land of Judah, and I believe that that is the only acceptable response in that manner. Nobody wants to have the wrath of God coming against them, especially not those who are supposed to be his people. So Jehoshaphat takes the lead. He rallies the people together, and he takes down all of the false gods, and he clears them out so that the people can seek God and truly, wholeheartedly following after him. Once again, we get a strong, thriving kingdom because the people are following God, especially the leader. They have all set their heart to seek after him and to do his will. It reminds me of studying Nehemiah's prayer and learning that prayer is seeking after God. Jehoshaphat begins living his life in this way. But just because he starts doing better and starts doing what he's supposed to, doesn't mean that it's all going to be sunshine and roses, unfortunately for him. We have two things that are going to happen in Jehoshaphat's life next. I'm not exactly sure how they played out, but I believe we're going to go over them in chronological order. So the first thing that's going to happen is in 2 Kings chapter 3. Jehoshaphat's going to experience kind of a bit of deja vu. You see, Joram is now king of Israel. This is the son of Ahab. And he starts having some trouble with these people called the Moabites. And he says, "Hey, Jehoshaphat, we have an alliance because my sister is married to your son, so you should come to war and help me with the Moabites." Once again, that alliance, this is an expectation. It is not really a question. So Jehoshaphat is basically obligated to go help Joram in this war against the Moabites. Once again, bad situation. He 100% got himself into it, yet he still is like, "Hey, yes, I will do this, but first, I want to talk to a prophet of God. I want to consult him. I want to see what God has to say about this." So some men go out and they find Elisha, and it's kind of funny because Elisha is completely unimpressed with Joram. He said, "Go talk to the prophets that your father used because I am only here because of Jehoshaphat. That is the only reason I came. You can go away. I'm not dealing with that." But what I realized here is God isn't keeping a tally against Jehoshaphat because they didn't have to hunt and search for Elisha. They were able to go out and get him, and Elisha came because God is answering Jehoshaphat's prayer. He doesn't leave him to fight a hard and bloody war because, well, you asked for help last time and I helped you then, or it's the same problem. Can't you do it yourself this time? I think sometimes we expect God to view us in that way. Like if we have the same struggle over and over again, he looks down on us for not doing better. Shouldn't you be over that sin by now? I've already helped you with it. You've already prayed about it. What are you doing now? God doesn't do that. We as humans, we do that to each other and even to ourselves. But God knows what's in our hearts and minds. He knows when we can't handle it anymore. He knows when we are truly repentant and truly trying. For example, think about the Apostle Peter. How many times was Peter too brash, acted without thinking, stuck his foot in his mouth? You name it. The answer is several. I don't know the exact number, but the answer is Peter did that several times, okay? But there can be no doubt of the faith and the love that Peter had for God. He was key in the establishment and the growth of the church, of God's kingdom. There can also be no doubt of the love that God had for Peter, despite him struggling time and time again. So what about us? We need to realize that if there's something that we are continually struggling with and we don't take it to God, it's because we are unwilling to take it to God, not because he isn't there to listen to us. So God answers Jehoshaphat's seeking with a prophet by sending Elisha, and then continues to provide for his people. He very easily gave the Moabites into the hand of Joram and Jehoshaphat, and the Moabites went packing. They retreated out of there because they saw that there was no way they were going to win the war. It's here, I believe, that we come to the events of 2 Chronicles chapter 20. The first verse of this chapter tells us that the Moabites, Ammonites, and Meunites are coming to battle against Jehoshaphat. If you ask me, they said, "Oh, okay, round 1 didn't go very well for us. I don't like that outcome. On to round 2. Let's do better this time." And they intend to attack hard and fast. Jehoshaphat's response to this? Pretty reasonable. He's afraid. I would also be afraid. I cannot imagine. There are many things I have not been able to imagine in this lesson. But having so many people come against you in war, I would also be afraid. That would be so intimidating. But third time's the charm, he seeks the Lord. And you might be thinking, Riel, you've said that every time. Yes, but this time he does it first. There is no alliance with other people. There is no worrying or thinking about the strength of his men or of any other men who are on earth. He doesn't turn to Israel. He doesn't turn to Syria. He goes directly to God. Very first thing. It looks like he's finally learning the lesson that his father, learning a lesson from his father and his past mistakes. Isn't that such a good feeling? You know, when you've been struggling with something and you've been working on it time and time again, and you finally start to get it, it's such a good feeling. And Jehoshaphat, I feel like, is such a good example of this for us, because we're able to easily see the times that he struggled with it up to his success, and the fact that God was patient and present with him the whole time. He responded according to Jehoshaphat's actions, staying true to the character of God that we see all throughout the Bible. He is a just and righteous ruler, but he is also a faithful and loving father. It's no different for us today. God is always there waiting for us, especially in our time of need. When we seek him, he is faithful to answer our pleas. So 2 Chronicles 20 is where we're really going to get to see how Jehoshaphat seeks God. In verse 3, we can see that it says that he set his face to seek the Lord and has all of Judah join him with a fast. You know, food is something that is such a large part of our everyday life and everyday culture that is going to be a big impact. It's going to show something whenever we decide to go without it. And that's the point. The people of Judah are trying to let God know, hey, this is something that is significantly important to us. This is a serious matter. It also brings to mind Jesus' teaching in John 6:35, in which he says, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me shall not hunger, and whoever believes in me shall never thirst. And we know that this isn't referring to you never get hungry or thirsty again once you become a Christian. That's not what it's talking about. What it is saying is that just as food and water we need for our lives and that they sustain us, God should be needed and sustaining us like that. We should be constantly thinking about him and craving and needing from him, just as we need food and water every day. And so we see, just like in Nehemiah, this connection between prayer and fasting as an act of calling out to God. Many of the prayers in the Old Testament seem to have this format of, yes, I'm going to verbalize to God, but also I'm going to fast to really call out to him and call him near. They also address God in ways that we rarely would and maybe would even consider disrespectful. But God already knows. He knows what's really on our hearts. He knows what's really on our minds, and he can handle it. If there's a time in which we're really struggling, we're probably going to say stuff that we would not ordinarily say. And that's okay. He can take it. Read some of the prayers that David has prayed. God can take it. He is the ultimate power and authority. Jehoshaphat understands this, and he acts on it. His prayer is recorded for us in verses 6 through 12, so we're going to read that. But let's start in verse 5 to make sure that we get the full context. And Jehoshaphat stood in the assembly of Judah and Jerusalem in the house of the Lord before the new court and said, O Lord, God of our fathers, are you not God in heaven? You rule over the kingdom of the nations. In your hand are power and might, so that none is able to withstand you. Did you not, our God, drive out the inhabitants of this land before your people Israel, and give it forever to the descendants of Abraham, your friend? And they have lived in it and built for you in it a sanctuary for your name, saying, if disaster comes upon us, the sword, judgment, or pestilence, or famine, we will stand before this house and before you, for your name is in this house, and cry out to you in our affliction, and you will hear and save. And now, behold, the men of Ammon and Moab and Mount Seir, whom you would not let Israel invade when they came from the land of Egypt, and whom they avoided and did not destroy, behold, they reward us by coming to drive us out of your possession, which you have given us to inherit. Our God, will you not execute judgment on them? For we are powerless against this great horde that is coming against us. We do not know what to do, but our eyes are on you. The first several sentences of this are interesting to me because Jehoshaphat does start by acknowledging God's power and authority, which we've seen in other prayers, but he doesn't do it in the way that we would traditionally expect. Jehoshaphat addresses God with questioning and expectation. Essentially, he says, hey, we are keeping up our side of the covenant. We've come back to you. We are doing what we should be doing. We're following you. We're worshiping you. We've reformed. Your turn. Hold up your end of the bargain. I don't know about y'all. I don't think I could ever approach God in that manner. It sounds so bold. What power and authority do I have to call out God like that? Especially if I have someone who has been making the same mistake over and over again, such as not relying on God whenever I should, and I finally get a right to immediately turn around and say, okay, do your job. But that's part of the lesson we should learn. We talked about this earlier, but God does not hold Jehoshaphat's past against him. He isn't sitting there contemplating whether or not Jehoshaphat has earned his help, whether or not he's going to give it to him this time. As the people of Judah pursue God, so is God going to pursue them. And Jehoshaphat relies on that. In 2 Chronicles 19, the people reform. We talked about that. They seek God, and so it's perfectly reasonable for them to expect that and put their faith into God's word and what he has promised them. And that's exactly what it is. It is faith. When we turn to God, despite our mistakes, when we say, I know what I've done in the past, but I also know what your word says, and when we come to him with the expectation of forgiveness, that is when we are truly being repentant and whenever we are truly having faith in God and what he has said. It is then that we are no longer hesitant when we approach his throne. We won't hold back what we have to say because of fear or worry or our past mistakes, thinking that he's going to just grind us into the dust because of what we have done. We can boldly go to him in prayer for our thanksgivings, our fears, our worries, our plans, our hopes, our dreams, everything, because we have faith that what God has said to us, he truly meant. As humans, this can be hard for us to understand because our natural approach to dealing with people is based off of our interactions that we've had with them in the past. God doesn't operate in that manner. It's part of the truth and the beauty about him. Examples like Jehoshaphat, examples of people who have this faith in God are very encouraging to me. I have to pause and consider my own interactions with God, my own approach to him, and what he has promised me. Do I exhibit this kind of faith? Do I approach God in a way that shows I am not hesitant and I trust when he says that he loves me and has forgiven me? I mean, if I think about it, I hold myself on the hook for so many things. I know we all do. We all hold ourselves accountable for things that we shouldn't anymore, because the one who has the authority to do that is God. And he doesn't. That's not how he works. And then Jehoshaphat takes it a step further for me, because he has this approach, this very bold approach to God publicly. The entirety of Judah is here and present and participating in this. Like, it is all the people. It is not a one-on-one personal thing with God. It is very, very public. But it makes sense, because this is something that doesn't just concern Jehoshaphat. It concerns the entire nation of Judah. If they go to war, it's going to be long and hard, and they're going to struggle, and there's going to be losses, and their friends and family who have to go and fight and will probably die. Plus, we have to consider Jehoshaphat cannot make this appeal on his own. The people of Judah must have a relationship with God, not just follow their ruler's lead. They're dealing with something that is a hard and scary subject. If I'm honest, in congregations I've worshiped with in America, it is very uncommon for the hard and scary issues facing God's people to be addressed publicly. Families will talk about it amongst themselves. They will pray about it and seek God, maybe even with their friends. I know that church leadership is doing it because they also have to try to figure out how they're going to handle it. But rarely, if ever, do God's people all come together and unite calling out to God about it through prayer, and definitely never through fasting. Why? We see this example numerous times throughout the Bible of God's people approaching him as one. Isn't that what the church is supposed to be? Why then do we spend so much time coming at it as individual people or even individual congregations rather than the powerful unit that God designed the church to be? I think that's something that we need to seriously consider. So after Jehoshaphat has gathered the people together and talked about God's power and authority, he moves on to talking about the past, which is kind of interesting. We very often view looking at the past and considering it as something bad. The motto of forgive, forget, move on. We need to remember the Bible is a history book. All of it is the past. All of it has happened in the past. We have to be willing to bring up the past because that's what gives us the hope for the future. Jesus' sacrifice, his death, burial, and resurrection in the past is what gives us a hope for the future of eternity with God. The Israelites' past of coming out of the land of Egypt and making that covenant with God is what gives them the hope that he is going to stay true to his word, and as they obey him, he's going to be there and providing for them. The land that they are in, Jerusalem, Judah, this is what God promised Abraham way back when. This would be the inheritance that he would give his descendants. It's their livelihood and their home. It's their inheritance and a physical representation of their relationship with God. For them to lose this, it would be devastating. And I think we can see that in our study of Nehemiah. So Jehoshaphat not only brings up God's history with them, but he also brings up their history with God. What do I mean by that? Well, in verses 10 through 11, we can see Jehoshaphat essentially telling God that the only reason they are in this situation is because God's people were obedient to him. He reminds God that when they were coming into the land, they were instructed to leave the men of Moab, Ammon, and Mount Seir alone. To be honest, when I was studying this, I thought it was wrong. I thought that either Jehoshaphat had misremembered, had the facts wrong, was possibly even just straight up lying. I was like, okay, I gotta figure this out because what is happening? He's correct. In Deuteronomy chapter 3, we can see that. The Israelites were instructed to not harass or to contend with the men of Ammon, Moab, and Mount Seir, because these are the descendants of Lot. And so they were also given an inheritance by God. It's the land that they currently have. So keeping this information in mind, Jehoshaphat's approach is, hey, we left them and their inheritance, their stuff alone. Are you really going to come let them mess with our stuff? I mean, if you protected them and their stuff from us, protect us and our stuff from them. We don't see him get upset that God has given an inheritance to another people. We don't see him worried about his kingdom borders expansion or his wealth. Instead, he's worried about the people. He's worried about the nation of Judah. And I think it is in part because he cares about his people, but also in part because of verse 8, in which he says, they have lived in it and have built for you in it a sanctuary for your name. This is thought of to be a dwelling place of God. It is a dwelling place of God. He resides in the temple in Jerusalem. If foreign nations come and take that, what is that going to mean? He ends this prayer, this plea to God, with a beautiful proclamation in verse 12. Let's read it again. O God, will you not execute judgment on them? For we are powerless against this great horde that is coming against us. We do not know what to do, but our eyes are on you. I love this so much because we can see the growth that Jehoshaphat has gone through. In the beginning, he followed Asa's example, and Asa was a good king. We see that throughout the Bible. Asa was a good king, but he still made mistakes, and Jehoshaphat followed along in those mistakes, relying on man instead of immediately turning to God. As time went on, he would go to God sooner and sooner until he comes to this situation, and he is completely lost. He's afraid, he doesn't know what to do, so he immediately turns to God and does nothing except reach out to God for help. He tells God his expectations, and he waits. He doesn't try to solve it on his own. He takes God's word and promises at face value and waits in faith. It was very weird to say that he waits in faith instead of he steps out on faith or he walks in faith. But that's what he did. Now, later on, when God answers his prayer, he will obey and he will definitely step out on faith. Keep reading in 2 Chronicles if you want to read about that, because it's really interesting. But right now, with this prayer, with his seeking of God, he waits. This is usually the hardest part for me personally. I have definitely been one who has needed to pray for patience. And there have been times it has been very challenging for me to wait. I feel like I'm in that phase of life right now where God is moving pieces for the future, but all I can do right now is sit and pray and wait in faith. And you would think that the more you do it and the older you get, the easier it would be. It is not. I can almost promise you, well, okay, if we are honest, for the human side, it is not easier. It doesn't get easier. But for the side of us that holds true to God and shapes ourselves to be like him, it does. Because we're able to take a step back and breathe and realize it's not on us. It's not our job. It's not our responsibility. We are not the master. We are not the one who is doing the planning and moving the pieces. We don't have to be able to see ahead to the future and be able to make sure that things happen in the correct time. We simply seek God and wait. It's easier to not stress when you know it's not all on you. When you realize that there are bigger shoulders that have come and they've picked up that problem, walked off on it, come back, picked you up and walked off with you too, taking you right where you need to go. So Jehoshaphat seeks the Lord. He does his best to live meeting God's expectations and guiding the people of Judah towards him. He prays and fasts, calling out to God spiritually and physically when needed. He acknowledges God's power, but he also holds to the promises and expectations that God has put forth of his people and of himself. He feels the emotions that come with situations, fear, powerlessness, distress, and he waits. He waits until God moves, seeing that when God does move, it is in such a way that there can be no question about who was working and why they were victorious. To wait in faith. What a concept. To see the scary, challenging things coming down the road, to know that there's nothing we can do against them. To seek God, fasting and praying to him. Our eyes are on you. Such a simple yet powerful statement. I think it is quite a challenge to wait in faith and pray like Jehoshaphat. Thank you.